Chapter 181, Rewards. But darling, your luck is really good. Others can get a few galleons from Death Eaters at most. This is real estate in Diagon Alley, Vanessa said enviously. None of this family owns property in Diagon Alley. It's just a fluke. Maybe you'll have the same luck one day. By the way, I'll treat you to dinner after finishing the property conversion procedures, Anduin laughed. Okay, it's a deal, Vanessa replied, her eyes sparkling. To her, Anduin had become a small local tyrant, so she naturally wouldn't refuse. The procedure is very simple. I'll take you through the real estate formalities first, and then we can go see the minister. She may be busy right now, Vanessa said after returning the title deed to Anduin. Sounds good to me, Anduin smiled. Anduin followed Vanessa to the 5th floor, where they completed the formalities at the office of the International Magic Trade Standards Association of the Department of International Magical Cooperation. They stamped 3 official seals on the documents, and the record file was complete. Anduin noticed that almost all matters related to trade and commerce had to go through the International Department of Magical Cooperation. He realized this was because of the goblins. Since almost all trade required the use of gold galleons cast by goblins, and goblins were involved in business, they belonged to the international neutral camp. Many commercial activities and transactions had to refer to international magic laws, so it made sense to concentrate all trade business here. Knock, knock. Anduin knocked on the door of the Minister of Magic's office after completing the business. Please come in. Anduin walked into the office and found Barty Crouch, Director of Legal Enforcement, and Moody there. They seemed to have just finished discussing something, and Barty Crouch was sorting out some documents. Seeing Director Crouch, Anduin thought of the confessions of those Death Eaters. It seemed that Crouch's son was a Death Eater, so Anduin wasn't completely sure about the director's position. It's just in time, Anduin. We were talking about you just now. How are you resting? Minister Budnow rarely showed a gentle expression and asked with a smile. Hello, Minister Budnow. The lounge arranged by Moody was very comfortable, and I rested very well, Anduin smiled. That's good. Regarding the battle this morning, Moody has written a very detailed report. As a minor wizard, you fought bravely and independently defeated the 5 forces headed by Torquil Travers. You are a Death Eater who has made outstanding contributions to the entire British wizarding world, so we should reward and encourage you, Millicent Barnold said, as capable as ever, getting straight to the point. Moody, on the side, kept winking at Anduin with a smile, as if he knew some good news in advance. Despite his usual stern demeanor, his actions were still quite intimidating. You're flattering me. I was just protecting my own safety, not seeking any reward. Those Death Eaters have been threatening the safety of the wizarding world and hindering the peace process. All wizards, with justice in their hearts, have the responsibility and obligation to confront them. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, Anduin said, standing upright with a serious face. If Yulia were here, she would probably vomit blood on the spot hearing Anduin say such words. This young man was more hypocritical and insidious than all the Slytherins she had ever seen. However, the 3 people present couldn't help but nod after listening to Anduin's words, their thoughts becoming more firm. This young man had justice in his heart, was modest and prudent, had both good character and learning, decent manners, and a good image. He was truly a high-quality candidate. Well, you don't need to be too humble. We will never forget your outstanding contribution, and we have already discussed your reward, Millicent Barnold said, spreading out a document in her hand and glancing at it. First of all, Mr. Anduin Wilson, the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes has monitored your off-campus spellcasting in Regent's Park at 6 o'clock this morning and in downtown London at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon. I hereby declare that all your previous spellcasting outside the school is legal, Millicent Barnold stated seriously. Secondly, since you faced the violence of 5 Death Eaters independently this morning, resisted with great difficulty, subdued all of them, and then handed them over to the Department of Law Enforcement to assist the Ministry of Magic in fighting against evil, the Ministry of Magic intends to reward you as follows. First, the Ministry of Magic will award you a gold medal of courage. Secondly, the the Ministry of Magic will award you a bonus of 1,000 galleons as encouragement. Third, the Ministry of Magic will bestow upon you the title of Battle Hero, along with a Medal of Honor. The Ministry of Magic will hold a public celebration banquet for you in a few days, where you will be honored publicly. The Ministry of Magic Public Information Office will also prepare a personal interview for you, so remember to prepare for it when the time comes. After reading out the commendation order, Millicent Barnold restored his gentle expression and smiled at Anduin. Battle Hero? Anduin was stunned for a moment after listening to Minister Barnold's reading. He knew that this fair and capable minister of the Ministry of Magic would definitely not treat him poorly, and he could anticipate medals of bravery and bonuses. After all, he had experienced it once, but he didn't expect that the minister would award him the title of a battle hero. He wasn't a public official, not even an adult wizard. Why did they suddenly give him such a significant title and specially arrange a celebration banquet and exclusive interview? This was truly unexpected. Seeing Anduin standing there in shock, Moody laughed and said, "How about it? I bet you didn't expect this. You'll be able to show off this time." "But a battle hero? Me?" Anduin pointed to himself, looking at the crowd with some uncertainty. "Why, it's too late for others to be quite heroes. What do you have to be shy about?" Moody stood up and teased. "I think Anduin wanted to ask why we gave him such a high honor with such a big fanfare." Barty Crouch, who hadn't spoken until now, laughed. "Yes, I'm just an underage wizard, and I'm not an Auror of the Ministry of Magic, so I can't bear such a high honor," Anduin wondered. End of this chapter. Chapter 182. Although he greatly values honor and is quite greedy when it comes to acquiring resources, this kind of gift that exceeds reasonable expectations still leaves him a bit perplexed. One must remember that there is no such thing as love without reason in this world. Often, the more you take, the more you will have to repay in the future. It seems that Moody's evaluation of you is correct. You are so humble and content at such a young age. Millicent Barnold nodded in satisfaction. As for awarding you the honor of Battle Hero, we made this decision after careful consideration. Barty Crouch took over the conversation. The current wizarding world has just experienced a war, and many remnants of Death Eaters are still hiding in the shadows, trying to cause trouble. So even now, it is impossible to talk about the real restoration of peace. Most wizards living in the UK are caught in a tangled emotion, celebrating the downfall of the Dark Lord on one hand, but also worrying that the Death Eaters might endanger their safety, Director Crouch explained. Millicent Barnold nodded and continued, "At this time, we need some morale-boosting news. You, a minor wizard, defeated 5 Death Eaters. This will silence those cowards who overemphasize the power of the Death Eaters. At the same time, this can also show the Ministry of Magic's determination to fight against the Death Eaters and put pressure on those who are still trying to defend them. Besides, you are a Muggle-born wizard. Because of the Dark Lord, many Muggle-born wizards have been living in fear, with many seeking refuge abroad. The number of wizards in the country has significantly dropped since the war. This arrangement is also a signal to reassure these wizards. I'm sorry if this sounds too utilitarian, but the British wizarding world is now recovering, and we need more good news to restore wizards' confidence in the Ministry of Magic." Millicent Barnold was very straightforward, explaining to Anduin why they made such a decision. This showed the minister's fair and candid side. Of course, it is also possible that she disdains deceiving a young wizard. "I see. Thank you for your frankness. If this is the case, I am honored to accept the award from the Ministry of Magic," Anduin said, understanding the cause and effect. He felt more grounded and simply accepted it. In his view, this kind of behavior is just to set a role model and a typical example. It was not uncommon in previous lives, just like in the United States, where for the sake of political correctness, they would promote a diverse mix of individuals to high-ranking positions. The nature of a show is a bit more, but it is not a disadvantage to him in the end. For Millicent Barnold, Anduin was indeed a good candidate. Judging from past experience, he had helped the Order of the Phoenix fight against the Death Eaters, so there was no problem with his position. At the same time, Moody also had a high opinion of him. He had interacted with many members of the Order of the Phoenix, had a good reputation, and could independently fight against several Death Eaters. Whether he relied on his own force or alchemical props, this represented his strength. The most important thing was his good image. Originally, Millicent Barnold wanted to push Moody forward. After all, he was the only Auror with enough achievements, but his appearance was quite intimidating and had the potential to backfire. In that case, you should go back and prepare well. The celebration banquet is currently scheduled for a week later, and we will announce it in the Daily Prophet soon. If you need help with anything, you can directly contact Moody. Director Crouch said, looking at Moody and motioning for him to assist Anduin. Don't worry, Moody assured. Moody enthusiastically pulled Anduin out of the minister's office. He then led Anduin back to his own office and began detailing the arrangements for the celebration banquet scheduled for the following week. Isn't this a bit too grand? Anduin asked after hearing, jaying the details. He felt it was somewhat exaggerated, noting that many important members, including almost all of the Wizengamot Council, had been invited. To be honest, giving you honors and holding a celebration is secondary, Moody explained. The main goal is to put pressure on those pure-blood families. It's a pity that Torquil is gone. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to go through all this trouble. We could have just used the Travers family as an example to scare the others and take their seat in the Wizengamot. That would make anyone think twice before sheltering Death Eaters. Moody, considering Anduin one of his own, spoke candidly and even revealed some of the minister's plans. Torquil is gone? What do you mean? Anduin asked, puzzled. Just as we were preparing for his interrogation, Torquil died suddenly before he could speak. We don't know if he was cursed or poisoned, but poisoning seems the most likely. Damn it, we haven't found the murderer yet. Not even a clue, Moody said angrily, frustrated that Scrimgeour still hadn't found any leads. Anduin felt relieved to hear there were no results, but he trusted Moody's judgment and believed his guess was accurate. Fortunately, they had never encountered something like a cyanide poison sac, which would have posed a significant risk of exposure. Torquil was poisoned. Anduin tried to steer the conversation. Then I shouldn't be a target. They wouldn't dare. Moody's eyes widened. You're a student of Dumbledore and will soon be honored as a battle hero by our Ministry of Magic. They'd need more than just guts to come after you. However, Anduin's words seemed to have made Moody a bit uneasy. He continued, Why don't I get you a double-sided mirror? If you're in danger, you can contact me immediately. No need to bother. I have this, Anduin said, pulling out a messenger amulet. What is this? Moody asked, intrigued. He always felt Anduin had a knack for producing unusual items. This is Messaging Talisman 2.0, an improved version with added positioning functions. I have one left, and I'll give it to you. If I'm in danger, it will send out an emergency signal, emitting red light and a screaming sound, and it will show my location. If it emits blue light, it's a normal signal, indicating I need to contact you, but it won't show my location. Good stuff, Moody said, accepting the amulet happily. If I receive your normal signal, I'll head to Longbottom's house to find you. After testing the amulet in front of Moody, Anduin bid him farewell. He then took Vanessa to the Leaky Cauldron via Floo and treated her to a good meal. End of this chapter. Chapter 183, Rest Assured. After bidding farewell to Vanessa and Tom, Anduin returned to the Longbottom house. Augusta was unaware of the day's events. So, in just one day, you defeated 5 Death Eaters and received an award from the Ministry of Magic? Augusta stared at Anduin, dumbfounded. Not bad, Anduin replied, stretching. He was exhausted from the day's events. The Ministry of Magic will hold a celebration banquet for me in a week. Merlin's beard, are you sure you're not joking with me? Augusta's face was full of disbelief. Didn't you listen to the wizard radio? The arrest of 5 Death Eaters is a big deal, Anduin said nonchalantly. I didn't expect you to do such a thing. My God, you weren't injured? Weren't those Death Eaters very scary? Augusta looked Anduin over with great concern. Don't worry, I'm fine. Otherwise, I'd be in the hospital right now, Anduin reassured her. By the way, the Ministry of Magic allows me to invite my friends to the celebration banquet. You will accompany me, won't you? Okay, no problem. Augusta finally breathed a sigh of relief after gradually digesting the news. After dealing with the shocked Augusta, Anduin returned to his room, claiming he was tired. He then took out a parchment to write invitations for the banquet. He decided to invite his classmates, professors, and Hagrid. Although he was a bit reluctant, he also wrote a letter to Snape. He included his friends outside of school, the Weasleys, Tom, Diggory, and the Lovegoods. After receiving their confirmation letters, Anduin had to report the guest list to the Ministry of Magic. Moody had told him that the banquet was just a show, a political game between the minister and various families and congressmen. Anduin just had to play his part. Having finished all this, Anduin collapsed onto his bed. He hadn't rested for a long time and quickly fell asleep. While Anduin slept soundly, news that shocked the entire wizarding world spread rapidly. People from all walks of life in the British magical community focused their attention on the young man named Anduin Wilson. Snape, who had just learned the news, rushed back to Hogwarts and burst into Dumbledore's office. "Have you heard the news? Did Anduin really capture 5 Death Eaters?" Snape asked hastily as he entered the office. "Indeed," Dumbledore replied, sitting at his desk and sipping tea leisurely. "I just sent a letter to Millicent. It's truly great news." "What do you think?" Snape pressed. "What do you mean? Isn't this good news?" Dumbledore asked, feigning ignorance. "Is it that simple? Yaxley is one of the 5 Death Eaters. How could Anduin have encountered him by such a coincidence and defeated them all unscathed?" Snape felt something was amiss. He had managed to locate Yaxley before, but before he could act, Anduin intervened. "I've read the incident report from the Ministry of Magic. Whether it's motives, timing, or the course of the battle, everything seems reasonable. There are almost no issues," Dumbledore said, though he was also surprised by the briefing. The facts seemed to speak for themselves. "Almost? Do you have doubts too?" Snape asked. "It's not doubt, just that the description of the event is too complete, almost perfect," Dumbledore replied, glancing at Snape. "Why do you care so much about this? No matter how you look at it, this is a good thing. Aren't you being too aggressive?" "Aggressive? You know what Anduin did to Yaxley. His absconding was almost facilitated by Anduin. Now he gets arrested by such a coincidence. How can I, knowing the inside story, remain calm?" Snape retorted. Snape expressed his dissatisfaction. "So, what are you planning to do? Why don't you ask this guy if all this about the top students in your academy is part of his little conspiracy?" Dumbledore looked at Snape and chuckled. "Are you still in the mood to laugh? Haven't you always been very concerned about whether he would go astray?" Snape asked, clearly puzzled by Dumbledore's reaction. "Yes, Anduin has excellent potential. He is determined. His strength far surpasses his peers, and his mind is very mature. I am actually very afraid that he might go to extremes," Dumbledore admitted, raising his head to meet Snape's gaze. "But because of this, after this incident, I feel more at ease with him." "Why?" Snape asked, still suspicious. "Because I found that we don't need to worry about whether he will take a wrong turn. He has a very clear and firm understanding of the path he should take, and you can see it from this incident," Dumbledore explained, spreading out the briefing. "Anduin didn't kill anyone from beginning to end, which proves that he knows how to measure his actions. He also targeted Death Eaters, which shows that he is very clear about his position. Even if he plays some tricks, he is just a wise man with a firm stance. And from his attitude towards his friends, both inside and outside the school, I can see that Anduin acts according to his principles. As long as his position is sound, I don't think anything else is a problem. And," Dumbledore continued, turning the briefing to the second page, "he is now a battle hero certified by the Ministry of Magic, the pride of our Hogwarts, and the glory of your Slytherin house." "What?" Snape quickly took the briefing and read it, soon realizing something. "Minister Budnor is going to have a showdown with those families?" "Yes, the timing of Anduin's arrest of these Death Eaters was impeccable, which is equivalent to giving her a significant advantage. How could she not seize it?" "Speaking of scheming, our Miss Budnor is not weaker than anyone," Dumbledore said with a knowing smile. "By the way, she also invited you to Anduin's celebration banquet, and this is your invitation letter." Dumbledore handed Snape a letter. Because Anduin didn't know the home addresses of some professors, and because he was too lazy to deliver them individually, he sent all the professors' invitation letters to Dumbledore and asked him to distribute them. "Humph, at least he still remembers me as the head of his house," Snape said, finally relaxing a little after reading the invitation letter. End of this chapter. Chapter 184, Diagon Alley. After a day's rest, Anduin finally regained his energy. He accompanied Augusta for a quick breakfast before borrowing the fireplace at the Longbottom residence to travel to the Leaky Cauldron. It was time to take possession of the property he had acquired in Diagon Alley. Diagon Alley 277, the three-story building Anduin had obtained from Tokyo, stood peacefully on the street. Although located on the south side of Diagon Alley, which was less bustling than the north side, there were still many pedestrians passing by. This time, Anduin could confidently enter the house through the front door. Upon entering, he took another look at the internal environment. The main entrance on the first floor was in the middle of the house, featuring a single door with a metal frame. The upper part of the door was made of glass, now covered with a curtain. Large glass windows flanked the door, also covered by curtains, making the entire first floor appear very dark. Once the curtains were drawn back, sunlight flooded the first floor, illuminating the space. It was clear that the house had been designed for commercial use, and Anduin had no intention of changing that. However, he decided that all the door locks needed to be replaced. The first floor was a large open room with a width of nearly 30 meters and a length of at least 6 meters, providing a direct area of more than 200 square meters. It was spacious enough to be used as a shop. The floor and walls were made of smooth, regular large stone bricks, similar to those on the second and third floors. A row of wall-mounted shelves lined both sides of the room, empty and covered in dust. A fireplace was situated in the middle of the house against the wall, aligned with the fireplaces in the basement, second, and third floors. The room had a dull, musty smell. It seems the entire first floor has been abandoned for a long time. Those Death Eaters probably used it as a corridor leading to the gate, Anduin mused as he observed his surroundings. But apart from some dust, it's very dry. Let's clean up the first floor first. Anduin mobilized his magic, creating a whirlwind that swept across the room, gathering all the dust from the floor and shelves and expelling it out the window. He then used the aguamenti spell to scrub the room clean, dried it with magic, and opened the windows for ventilation. Soon, the entire hall exuded a refreshing atmosphere. He repeated the cleaning process on the second and third floors, paying special attention to the areas where the Death Eaters had been the night before. Once the stains were cleaned, he turned his attention to the rooms on the third floor. I noticed last time that the rooms here are quite special. Not every room is made of stone bricks. I think the original layout was different, Anduin thought. He used a shrinking spell to reduce the size of the furniture and beds in the 5 guest rooms, planning to discard them as they were of average quality and had been used by the Death Eaters. He then began to inspect the walls of the third floor. As he suspected, the rooms had been temporarily separated by earth bricks, with makeshift doors. Anduin decided to demolish these temporary walls, restoring the third floor to its original stone wall structure. After the cleanup, the entire third floor was restored to its original appearance. There are actually only 2 rooms on the third floor, one large and one smaller. The bathroom is connected to the larger room. It seems that the entire third floor consists of a master bedroom, a second bedroom, and a living room. The layout is good, and the place is very spacious. After redecorating, it will be able to accommodate people. Anduin nodded, feeling very satisfied. Anduin spent an entire day buying a lot of furniture and decorations from Diagon Alley and Muggle shopping malls. Fortunately, with the help of magic, transportation was not troublesome. He then rearranged the master bedroom on the third floor, adding carpets, curtains, a double 4-poster bed, various chairs, and other furnishings. After all the decorations, the room finally had a homey atmosphere. He also changed the door lock, which made him feel more secure. At least I can live here comfortably. Now I have a fixed residence and don't have to stay with others during my vacations, Anduin thought with satisfaction as he clapped his hands. But his work was not over yet. Anduin sat down at the desk, took out a piece of parchment, and started writing and drawing on it. He needed to arrange a new set of protective spells for the entire house. He was very disdainful of the protective spells used by the Death Eaters before, and planned to carefully plan his future residence. In terms of vigilance, my recent study of the Looking Glass has yielded some small achievements. The rune of malicious perception should be mastered soon, and I will add that. Normal warning spells are also necessary, and some anti-reconnaissance measures must be implemented, including chimneys and sewers. Then, the anti-Alohomora curse must be cast on the doors and windows. There should be a one-way confundus charm and muffliato on the second and third floors so that people outside the house cannot spy on the inside through the windows. There must be a reversal spell in the house and a delayed human presence spell and tracking spell on the ground so that if someone breaks in, it will leave traces. The walls must be enchanted with an anti-intrusion curse that repels intruders. In addition to the basic total protection and safeguarding spells, I might need to set up some protective traps, like physical trigger defense mechanisms, such as broadsword landmines. I can also hang a few double-sided mirrors in the house for surveillance, but those are a specialty of Cairo and are not common in the UK. He densely wrote down a whole page of the residential protection plan on the parchment, planning to implement it after receiving payment from Yulia. After arranging everything, Anduin returned to the Longbottoms' house directly from the fireplace at number 277 Diagon Alley, just in time for dinner. The next day, Anduin received the long-awaited good news from Yulia. Is everything finally assembled? The efficiency is not bad. Anduin thought as he looked at the letter signed by Travers, end of this chapter. Chapter 185, The Great Harvest. After being notified by Yulia, Anduin began his preparations. First, he adjusted various tactical equipment to convenient positions, ensuring they could support a small-scale battle. Although the probability of conflict was low, he couldn't guarantee that the Travers family wouldn't turn hostile. Next, he organized his space equipment. Given the substantial amount of materials to be collected, he emptied all the linen space bags he had and the dragon skin space bags seized from Tokir to ensure sufficient volume. He also gathered enough parchment for copying books, which was fortunately stored in basement 277. The validity period of the linen space bag is only 1 or 2 years. It seems that after obtaining those materials, I'll need to make a new one, Anduin mused, looking at the linen bag in his hand with some sentiment. This bag had been with him for almost 3 years. After making all the necessary preparations, he set off for Travers Manor. Initially, Yulia had proposed that he enter directly through the Flu network, but Anduin didn't dare to accept. Appearing directly in the heart of someone else's family could be dangerous if he were surrounded and attacked, so he chose to enter from the outside. Upon reaching the gate of the manor, following the address provided by Yulia, Anduin conducted a thorough investigation. Using the Echo Curse and Crow spell to confirm the surroundings, he finally felt confident enough to enter. Compared to Anduin's cautiousness, Yulia was filled with anxiety. It wasn't that she didn't want to be cautious, she simply didn't dare. The confirmation that Tokiel had died under the protection of a group of Aurors had terrified her. Until now, she didn't know what method Anduin had used. Was it a curse, or some other dark magic? What if he used the same method on them? With these thoughts, she just wanted to complete the transaction quickly and stay far away from this boy. You are here. Come with me. I will hand over all the materials to you first, Yulia said with a dark expression as she saw Anduin appear at her door. Without further ado, Yulia led the way, ignoring Anduin. It seemed that there were only the two of them in the entire manor, as no one else appeared. After following Yulia into a room, Anduin saw various supplies piled up all around. It was clear that Yulia did not intend to let Anduin enter her treasure house. Instead, she had transported all the promised materials to this room. Looking around, Anduin saw a table in the center of the room filled with piles of gold coins, forming a golden hill mixed with a lot of silver sickles and copper nuts. In fact, the Travers family didn't have that much cash at all. To gather this wealth, they had even sold a lot of antiques. Next to the gold coins were various metal materials, some fused into small bricks, but most were metal products. Anduin saw a lot of goblin silverware, including silver necklaces, bracelets, earrings, silver pots, silver cups, and even a stack of knives and forks made of goblin silverware. There was also a large candlestick made of half mithril, which seemed to have been cut to meet the weight requirement. Together with various other utensils made of agrabah alloy and palasar brass, the collection was quite spectacular. There were also 3 wooden boxes, 1 large and 2 small, next to these metal utensils. Anduin opened the large one first and found a pound of fairy ulam steel inside, along with a metal dagger, a pair of bracelets, a ring, and 3/4 of a belt buckle. It was evident that these were alchemy props before, but all the runes inscribed on them had been washed away. "You don't want me to take advantage of the runes, but I don't like your spells," Anduin muttered disdainfully. The value of this pound of fairy ulam steel was very high, second only to refined mithril in this transaction. No wonder it had to be specially packed. The case, then, the 2 small boxes next to it should be. Opening a small box next to it, as expected, it contained 3 ounces of refined mithril. Unlike other metal materials Anduin had seen, this mithril was not made into utensils, but was presented in a very raw form. The piece of refined mithril lay flat in the small box, resembling an irregular round cake without any processing. The entire metal surface constantly shimmered with a halo the size of a grain of rice, creating a beautiful effect. Anduin hardly needed to concentrate to establish a connection with this piece of metal through his perception. No wonder it was considered the best guidance material in the magical world. It was indeed well-deserved. Then he opened another small box, which contained a potion bottle filled with a golden solution. This must be the Felicia elixir. It would take half a year to prepare, and the materials used were also very precious. This was the first time he had seen it. In addition to these items on the table, there was also a pile of furs, medicinal herbs, and other materials on the side. The various smells emitted from them mixed together, making the air in the room very turbid. "Come on," Yulia said, her expression still stern. Seeing her family's wealth about to be taken away, she couldn't feel comfortable. Anduin nodded, and then began to count the items one by one, very carefully. He not only had to check the quality and weight of these substances, but also had to use detection magic to ensure there were no poisons or curses hidden on them. He couldn't afford to relax. Seeing Anduin's cautious demeanor, Yulia couldn't help but curl her lips helplessly. She had initially harbored evil thoughts, but feared that if she didn't succeed, it would bring disaster to her family instead. It took nearly an hour for Anduin to check all the materials and confirm that there were no problems. Finally, he nodded with some reassurance and then categorized all the materials and galleons into space props. "Very good. The quantity and quality of the materials are fine. The next step is to copy and collect the books," Anduin said, nodding to Yulia with satisfaction. Despite everything, this woman had done well. "Humph, you don't need to be hypocritical," Yulia retorted, still not giving Anduin any good looks. "Come with me. The library is upstairs." Anduin didn't mind Yulia's bad attitude and just followed her with a smile. As Yulia pushed open a large, ornately decorated double wooden door, the Travers family's library was revealed. The area inside was not very large. After entering the door, there was a long corridor with several long, solid wood tables in the middle. Against the right wall, several long sofas were placed. End of this chapter. Chapter 186, The Library. On the left side of the corridor, rows of bookshelves over 2 meters high were filled with books. There were 3 rows of bookshelves, and as far as the eye could see, there were at least a dozen rows, amounting to dozens of bookshelves. "Is this all of Travers's collection of books? We agreed that no private storage or transfer is allowed," Anduin said with a smile, glancing at Julia. "Don't worry, we made an oath, and we know the consequences of deceiving you," Yulia snorted, pointing with her chin. "I transferred all the books stored in the study room in the family and piled them on those long tables. Don't you see them?" Indeed, apart from the bookshelves on the side, there were stacks of books on the desks, clearly moved from other places. "Where's Slytherin's manuscript?" Anduin asked, tilting his head. "It's in the wooden box on the first table. According to our agreement, these manuscripts are worth 5 books, Yulia confirmed, pointing to the long table in front of her. "Okay, As long as you promise that this is all there is and no other manuscripts are hidden, I will keep my word. Anduin nodded in affirmation. Also, we agreed that in this library, once all the books are copied, there is no need to go back and forth, and the original manuscripts must not be damaged. As long as 300 books are copied, or the books are damaged, the transaction will be deemed terminated, and no further copies will be allowed. The selection time is within 24 hours from now. Don't blame me for driving people out after this time, Yulia said in a concentrated voice. Hey, it seems that there is something really good hidden in this library that makes you so nervous, Anduin teased, looking at Yulia with a smile. Humph, Yulia snorted coldly at Anduin's words. Indeed, because of the oath, she had to show all the books in her collection, but the real treasures inherited from the Tefris family were well disguised. Thinking of this, she calmed down. Even with the eyesight of a professional scholar, it would be difficult to find them in such a short period. Additionally, she stored other precious books as decoys, making it quite safe. Ignoring Yulia's dark expression, Anduin walked to the box with the Slytherin manuscript. After opening the wooden box, he found an old book with a sense of age quietly placed inside. The paper had turned yellow, and some pages had fallen off due to age. There were a few scattered parchments next to the books, as well as 2 bundled volumes of the manuscript. Yulia, not looking at Anduin, who was quietly checking the materials, walked to the sofa and sat down gracefully. She hoped he would get so engrossed in reading the treasures that he would ignore those hidden in the library. Anduin didn't know what Yulia was thinking, but he was in a good mood. He opened the bound book and checked the contents inside. This is Slytherin's research notes, containing a lot of black magic and blood magic, Anduin murmured, almost unable to suppress his joy and excitement. But he resisted the urge to read it carefully and quickly took out parchment from his space bag, copying the contents of the note. Now was not the time to study it carefully. After adjusting his mood, he returned to a calm state and looked at the 2 volumes of manuscripts. One contained the rune formula of the Slytherin Spirit Protection Curse, but many words were incomplete, and there were a few errors in the rune lines. Huh? Could it be that Yulia deliberately destroyed these contents so that I couldn't get the complete formula? Anduin pondered. If the notebook wasn't destroyed, and I only copied it, why would she be so devastated? The original manuscript must have been incomplete. But where did the protective spell in Tokiel's brain come from? Could it have been restored by the ancestors of the Travers family and recorded elsewhere? It seems likely. Tokiel mentioned that Yulia used the magic book to cast a spell on him, so the magic book must be the key. With this judgment in mind, Anduin carefully copied the incomplete information. After putting away the manuscript, he opened another rolled-up document. Fear? Anduin was taken aback by the title on the manuscript. The document was intact, confirming his suspicions, but the content still surprised him. Does this kind of magic really exist? It can release mental fluctuations to induce fear in the hearts of surrounding creatures at any time. Like the mental protection spell, this is a thinking spell. Considering the rumors that Slytherin excelled in occlumency and legilimency, it seems he had a deep understanding of mental magic. Without hesitation, Anduin quickly copied the manuscript. Given his extensive research on combat tactics, this magic was far more practical than the mental protection spell. The 2 magics complemented each other, one for offense, the other for defense. Just from these copied materials, the trip was already worthwhile. Taking a deep breath, Anduin suppressed his thoughts about the Slytherin manuscript and turned his attention to the other books on the table. With his experience as a frequent visitor to Hogwarts' library and restricted sections, ordinary magic books no longer piqued his interest. He had planned this long before the summer vacation, and although he hadn't read all the books in the school library, he had copied all their titles in advance. His first task was to eliminate any books that overlapped with those available in the market or stored in Hogwarts. Due to the oath, Yulia couldn't hide the books, but she could disguise important collections as ordinary books, making it necessary for him to examine each one. Anduin quickly sorted through the high piles of books, most of which were common. He would grab one, flipped through it casually, and then set it aside, regardless of how intriguing the contents were. After his swift search, he divided the books into two piles, one with familiar titles and the other with books he had never seen before. As the month drew to a close, Anduin felt a sense of accomplishment. He had uncovered valuable information and was eager to delve deeper into his findings. End of this chapter. Chapter 187, Endless Darkness. Are there only these 40 or so books that I haven't seen? It seems that the books Yulia transferred from other places are not of high quality. I have to start with this library, Anduin quickly decided. After sorting the books on the long table, Anduin began to focus on the bookshelves next to him. He patiently took out each book and skimmed through them. After a while, he made a discovery. Ancient Alchemy Minutes? Anduin pulled down a massive, palm-thick book from the top of a bookshelf. It was hard to miss a book of this size. Flipping through its contents, he found it recorded a large number of ancient alchemy techniques, including many unoptimized rune formulas and a few that had been lost over time. It was essentially a history book of alchemy. Yulia, this book can only be counted as one, Anduin laughed, placing the heavy book on the table next to the rare books he had sorted out to keep. Understood, but can you hurry up? Do you really plan to stay here all day? Yulia asked, looking at him with an annoyed expression. Although the book was very precious, its large volume made it impossible to hide. She could only watch helplessly as Anduin copied the book. Anduin continued his search like a meticulous shopper at a market, carefully examining each book. If he was satisfied, he kept it. If not, he put it back. If this were a real market, the boss would probably have thrown him out by now. Soon he found another interesting book in the bottom corner of a bookshelf. Endless Darkness? The title intrigued Anduin, and he couldn't help but want to read it. His keen perception detected faint magical fluctuations emanating from the book. Finite Incantatum. Anduin took out his wand and cast a universal counterspell on the book. To his surprise, the book reacted strangely. With a bang, it opened automatically upon contact with the spell. Realizing something was wrong, Anduin immediately threw the book away, but it was too late. He had already been ensnared. In an instant, Anduin found himself in a void of darkness. He couldn't see his own hand in front of his face, and all light and sound around him had completely disappeared. Lumos! He reacted quickly, pulling out his wand and casting a light spell, but it had no effect. His surroundings remained pitch black. The tactile sense of touching the wand is normal, and the magic power feedback is also normal. The spell was cast, but I still can't see or hear anything. My 5 senses are affected, Anduin quickly deduced after finding the spell ineffective. Closing his eyes tightly, he mobilized his magic power, gathering it in his brain and sweeping it towards his eyes. His occlumency skills had reached an instinctual level, making it easy to integrate magic power and thought. Soon, he discovered the problem. A strange magic power was entrenched in his mind, combining with runes he had never seen before. These runes interfered with his thoughts and senses. He mobilized his own magic power to continuously flush the runes, destroying them after a while, and restoring the magic power to normal. He smoothly cleared the magic power from his brain. Opening his eyes again, his eyesight and hearing were restored. Anduin finally returned to normal and looked back, only to find that Yulia had approached him without his noticing, as if she were observing something. I'm disappointed. This book didn't cause me much trouble, but I am very interested in the principles and runes contained in it, Anduin remarked, seemingly unconcerned by Yulia's unusual behavior. He then picked up the book titled Endless Darkness. Yulia was taken aback. Damn it, won't you be blinded immediately if you are hit by the black magic hidden in this book? Why did this guy recover in just a few seconds? She thought. She didn't know much about Endless Darkness, but she had heard Tokiel mention that he had accidentally turned to this book when he was young and was unfortunately hit by its magic, which almost caused him to be permanently blind. Old Travers, who is still alive, had sought medical treatment everywhere. This book had been sealed for a long time and was only taken out because of this transaction. She had originally intended to trick Anduin with it, so she placed it in a prominent position. Who would have thought that this guy would recover so quickly? It even made her a little skeptical about the book's power. After recovering, Anduin understood the trickiness of this book. It seemed to be imbued with anti-cracking spells and stress spells, which would activate automatically with any fluctuations in magic power. He was much more cautious this time and opened it again after activating occlumency. The moment he opened it, the magical fluctuations occurred again, but Anduin, who had been prepared, was not affected. This allowed him to get a glimpse of the content recorded within. The book detailed a kind of black magic called endless darkness. It recorded in detail the rune structure and usage of this magic. In Anduin's eyes, this magic was very outrageous. It had an exaggerated speed of thought intrusion, and the magic fluctuation was very subtle. It could directly and instantly deprive the enemy of hearing and vision, and if one didn't know the method to counter it, it could almost cause permanent damage. It's dangerous. Such a dangerous magic book is so blatantly placed on the bookshelf. It seems Yulia wants to harm me, but after understanding the mechanism of the runes, it's not difficult to find a way to defend against it. The most valuable part of this magic is the method of hiding magic fluctuations and the means of thought intrusion. These are really good things, Anduin thought. The content of this book gave him a lot of inspiration and skills. After the incident with endless darkness, Anduin became more cautious, maintaining occlumency almost all the time to prevent such accidents from happening again. Through continuous searching, Anduin also discovered Yulia's little tricks. She had changed the covers of some high-value books to look like ordinary ones, trying not to attract his attention. Fortunately, he had taken such precautions in advance and would read almost every book. For example, there was a book on alchemy disguised as an ordinary theory of magic. But after reading it in detail, he found that it actually contained the synthetic formula of Agrippa alloy. End of this chapter. Chapter 188, I Found You. Yulia had a peculiar habit of hiding valuable books in the bottom or top corners of the bookshelf, or sometimes among a row of books with similar covers. It was a childish attempt at concealment, but Anduin was thorough. He meticulously searched through the entire library, leaving no book untouched. Yulia, sitting anxiously by the side, watched as Anduin discovered each of her hidden treasures. Her heart pounded with fear that he might find that particular treasure she had hidden so carefully. After more than 6 hours of searching, Anduin had combed through almost all the bookshelves, collecting over 300 valuable materials. He even had a simple meal in the library. Normally, he would prioritize the 295 most important books, copy them, and leave. However, he felt as if he had missed something crucial. From Tokyo, Anduin had learned that there should be a magic book in Traver's house, one that contained the restored and complete Slytherin Spirit Protection Curse. Despite his thorough search, especially among the books with magical fluctuations, he hadn't found it. He even checked for secret rooms and compartments, but found nothing. What is the name of that magic book? Anduin pondered. It's a pity that Torkel's memory was blocked. Could it be that I missed something? Seeing Anduin's frustration, Yulia couldn't contain her anxiety any longer. She rushed forward. You've picked out all the books in the library. Hurry up and copy them. I don't have much time to stay here with you. Her reaction only heightened Anduin's suspicion. This woman was too anxious. He must have missed something. Despite his repeated thinking, he couldn't pinpoint what it was, and his irritation grew. Wait, don't I have that? Anduin suddenly remembered and rummaged through his space bag. Yulia watched as he took out a small wooden box and opened it to reveal a bottle of Felix Felicis. Did this guy find something? Yulia's heart raced as she saw Anduin take out the Felix Felicis. Without hesitation, Anduin took a small sip of the potion. He knew not to drink too much, as it could have adverse effects. Instantly, he entered a state of heightened awareness. The environment around him seemed more vivid, and his thinking and perception sharpened. Following his intuition, Anduin returned to the bookshelves, wandering among them. Yulia, now regretting her earlier outburst, could only hope that even with the aid of Felix Felicis, Anduin wouldn't find her hidden treasure. Suddenly, Yulia's heart tightened. Anduin was standing in front of a particular bookshelf, examining the books on it. The very bookshelf where she had hidden the precious item. Anduin's attention to this bookshelf wasn't just intuition. He had felt something off about it earlier. Upon closer inspection, he realized the oddity, a row of blank notebooks at the bottom. It struck him as strange. Why would there be completely blank notebooks on this shelf? With renewed determination, Anduin began to investigate the bookshelf more thoroughly, knowing he was on the verge of uncovering Yulia's secret. Upon discovering a whole row of identical notebooks, he didn't think much of it. This was, after all, the family's private library, filled with various books and materials. He had even come across study notes and old newspapers before, so finding a row of blank notebooks didn't raise any immediate suspicions. However, reflecting on it now, he remembered his fear that Yulia might have swapped the notebooks. He had checked each one meticulously, and while flipping through one of the blank notebooks, a fleeting thought had crossed his mind. At the time, the thought was so brief that he missed it, but after drinking with Felicia, he recalled it. Why don't I recognize the cover of this notebook? Anduin wondered aloud as he pulled a notebook from the pile with precision. As a scholar of alchemy who had spent years with Hagrid, a magical creatures enthusiast, he could quickly identify most biological materials. Yet the cover of this notebook was completely unfamiliar to him. Yulia, who had been sitting quietly nearby, appeared calm on the surface, but internally she was panicking. Her toes curled with anxiety. He found it. What should I do? Yulia's heart raced. She wanted to rush up and snatch the notebook from Anduin, but that would only confirm its significance. Calm down, she told herself. Even if he finds out, he won't know how to open it. To anyone else, it would just look like an ordinary notebook. Anduin, meanwhile, was indeed puzzled. He was almost certain there was something unusual about the notebook, but he couldn't detect any magical fluctuations. After examining it several times, he decided to try using magic. Finite incantatem, apparesium, reverte, reparo. He cast several spells in succession, but the notebook remained unresponsive. It didn't react to the revealing charm, nor did it seem to be affected by a transfiguration spell. What was going on? It seems that simply using spells isn't enough. Let's try a more physical approach, Anduin muttered. He then pulled out his hammer of no harm and raised it, ready to smash the notebook. Wait, what are you doing? Yulia exclaimed, jumping up to stop him. Oh, so there is something special about this book, Anduin said, smiling at Yulia's panicked reaction. Yulia realized she had given herself away. Seeing no point in hiding it any longer, she admitted, Yes, there's something special about it. But what are you planning to do? Destroy it just because you can't figure it out? I won't let you destroy our family's property. How about you tell me how to open this book and I won't smash it? Anduin suggested with a grin. End of this chapter. Chapter 189, Ancient Lightning Magic Text. Do you think I will reveal the secrets of my family so easily? And I warn you, if this book is even slightly damaged, you will not be allowed to stay in the library, Yulia warned sternly. Oh, you remember this agreement clearly. But don't worry, I mean what I say. And who told you that I'm going to break it? Anduin replied confidently. He then brought down the harmless hammer, its surface inscribed with the analysis rune, heavily onto the cover of the notebook. A loud bang echoed through the room. Yulia, watching from the side, felt her heart pound. The sound alone indicated the force behind the blow. Although she had great confidence in this family treasure, she couldn't help but feel nervous. Got it! After the harmless hammer struck the cover, a magical wave indeed emanated from the book. However, there was still no visible magical aura or spell pattern. It seemed to be hidden very deeply. Now, it depended on how much the hammer could reveal. Anduin continued to strike the notebook with the hammer, the knocking sound reverberating in the room. Yulia, unable to contain her anxiety, almost stepped forward to stop him. Yet, she noticed that the notebook remained undamaged despite the repeated blows. Finally, after Anduin's persistent hammering, the notebook revealed its true nature. The cover displayed a dense layer of magic patterns, crisscrossing in a seemingly chaotic manner. With the appearance of these patterns, the book could no longer be opened, as if it required an exact password to be accessed. Seeing this, Yulia gradually relaxed. As long as the treasure remained undamaged, she could forgive Anduin. She believed that no matter how clever Anduin was, he would never be able to crack the protection code of this magic book. The secret would remain undiscovered, as it required the unique methods of the Travers family. Then, to her shock, Anduin took out a bottle of blood from his coat. Recognizing the magic pattern on the notebook as a sophisticated and enhanced version of the bloodline charm, he had prepared for this moment. Fortunately, he had saved a lot of Torquil's blood. Under Yulia's dumbfounded gaze, Anduin skillfully opened the book using the blood from the crystal bottle. Once the bloodline protection was broken, the entire magic book emitted a burst of violent magical fluctuations. Various colors of magical auras shone on the cover, as if some kind of seal had been lifted. It took several seconds before it gradually calmed down. How is this possible? How does he know how to open the magic book? Yulia was so shocked that she couldn't close her mouth. Meanwhile, Anduin was happily flipping through the pages. So it turns out that the magic book Torquil mentioned is really just a magic book. It's not so much a book as it is an alchemy tool in the form of a book. This kind of magic book that stores runes is incredibly advanced, Anduin reflected as he examined the contents. This was a prop originally used to cast magic. On the first page after opening the cover, the name and incantation of a spell were displayed at the top. Calendar Fire. Below the spell name, 2 boxes appeared, one above the other. The upper box displayed the complete rune of the spell, while the lower box contained various explanations of the magic, such as precautions, spell removal, notes left by the ancestors of the Travers family, and even records of using the magic book to cast this spell. The lower box functioned like a display screen, allowing one to slide up and down to view all the records with a single swipe. Goodness, that means each page contains a spell or incantation, right? The runes and records. With this, people can learn magic quickly. Even if they can't master it, they can use the magic book to cast spells directly. Anduin marveled at the exquisite design as he flipped through the pages. He found that the records were primarily black magic and curses, which were either harsh to use or difficult to learn. Among them were the 3 unforgivable curses, legilimency, occlumency, and even Slytherin's mental protection technique. The last recorded use was recent, likely during Torquil's confrontation. As Anduin turned to one of the untitled pages, he made a significant discovery. What is this? His eyes widened at the sight of an empty spell column and record column, with only a special rune in the middle, intertwined with silver and blue lines. This was an ancient primitive magic text, a type of rune he had only heard about from Lily and Professor Burns. These runes could only be found on the bones of powerful magical creatures, ancient ruins, or natural magical creations. They were the most natural and original runes. Many modern runes are derived from these original runes, optimized and split for easier use and dissemination. However, the original runes themselves possess immense power and are challenging to control. Wizards of average skill can only use them after extensive analysis, which can take years, decades, or even longer. Some powerful wizards, however, can directly use these ancient runes. Could this be the rune that Lucius gave to Julia? Anduin recalled the scene he had seen in Temple Traverse memory, where Lucius asked his sister to safeguard a particular rune. This rune looks very much like an elemental rune. Could it be the lightning rune? After careful examination, Anduin made a preliminary judgment. He was familiar with lightning runes from his studies of elemental spells and had a high affinity for them. This affinity might explain why his wand, with a Thunderbird feather core, had chosen him. Despite his familiarity, Anduin had never delved deeply into lightning spells. He found the power of ordinary lightning spells to be disproportionate to the amount of magic power required, similar to ordinary flames. In simpler terms, the voltage of the lightning released was not strong enough relative to the magic power output. To increase the power, one would need to either practice extensively to strengthen the spell or increase the magic power output, which was impractical for Anduin, given his extensive research backlog. The thunder and lightning that everyone desires are here. 2 more chapters will be added tomorrow. As the month ends, I kindly ask for your monthly ticket recommendations. End of this chapter. Half Chapter 190, Family Ethics Drama. The original rune is different, somewhat akin to the relationship between an ordinary flame rune and the ancient Lihuo rune. It is said that the Lihuo rune structure is an ancient flame rune, directly translated into a spell with almost no optimization. This is why the Lihuo spell is so violent and difficult to control. Is this rune the same? Anduin's excitement grew as he observed the constantly intertwining and flickering magic aura. No, now is not the time for testing. I must be fully prepared before conducting research. Anduin suppressed his eagerness and took several deep breaths to regain his composure. He then continued to examine the various spells recorded in the magic book. As he delved deeper into the book, he realized that the most terrifying aspect was not the spells themselves. Many of these spells could be learned without the book. The truly frightening part was the usage record. The Curse of Dragonpox, Anduin read aloud, looking at Yulia with a smile. Hearing the name, Yulia trembled, as if a deep secret had been uncovered. The last time it was used was in 1968. I remember Nabi Leech, the first Muggle-born Minister of Magic, died of dragonpox that year, Anduin said. What do you mean? That has nothing to do with us. Don't accuse us falsely. Yulia, as if caught off guard, vehemently denied it before Anduin could say more. Her reaction only confirmed Anduin's suspicions. Your father, Abraxas Malfoy, also died from an accidental contraction of dragonpox. By the way, you married into the Travers family that year. Temple Travers, who is the same age as me, was born in 1969. So, you were with the Travers family in 1968, right? Anduin continued calmly. Yulia swallowed hard, her eyes becoming distant as she recalled painful memories. Let's hypothesize. You, having married into the Travers family, lent the magic book to your father. He used the curse to murder the Minister of Magic, but ended up infecting himself due to improper use. In other words, you indirectly killed your own father. Does Lucius know about this? Anduin reasoned, his expression blank. Shut up! Yulia's eyes turned red, her face contorted with rage. She glared at Anduin as if she wanted to devour him. She had completely lost the elegance and calmness of nobility. Oh, why are you so excited? I didn't say I would expose you. I'm just someone who enjoys listening to stories, especially those filled with crime, conspiracy, and family ethics, Anduin said, his tone mocking. Enough. You've already made us suffer. Isn't that enough? Now you want to rub salt in our wounds? Yulia panted heavily, her voice becoming hysterical. Suffer? You act like victims. After murdering others, you end up killing yourselves. That's not suffering, it's stupidity. If you want to talk about suffering, go tell the McKinnon family, who were killed by Torquil. They might just say, serves you right, Anduin retorted coldly, showing no mercy. Have you mocked us enough? You can't copy this magic book anyway. If you're done, take the book you copied and leave. Yulia roared angrily. Why does it feel like an eternity every time I face this boy named Anduin? Yulia thought. She had been forced to break down after just 2 encounters. Could this person be her nemesis? Oh, are you so sure that I can't copy this? Anduin looked at Yulia with a sneer. A magic book? He repeated, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Anduin, I have to admit, you are truly remarkable. You actually managed to find this treasure and break the seal on it. I never expected you to uncover its secrets. That was my biggest mistake, Yulia said, panting heavily, her emotions running high. But don't think you can replicate it. The essence of this magic book is not that of an ordinary book. It's an alchemical treasure. I don't want to waste any more time on you, so hurry up and leave with the other books. From Yulia's perspective, her greatest fear was Anduin discovering the secrets within the magic book, secrets related to Travers and the Malfoy family. If these secrets were exposed, it would not only tarnish the reputations of both families, but also prompt an investigation by the Ministry of Magic. It would make her and her father the laughingstock of the wizarding world. However, Anduin was indifferent to Yulia's concerns. What he excelled at was making the impossible possible. Solving problems was his forte, and he was determined to show Yulia just how adept he was. Anduin began to study the magic book meticulously. He occasionally tapped it with a harmless hammer, deducing the overall spell structure by following the lines of the runes inscribed on it. Is this a multi-layer spell structure superimposed to form a complete magic circle? He mused. In this magic book, the spells create independent functional units and enhance their stability. These units are used as layers of spells. By connecting multiple layers, a perfect multifunctional spell system is formed. This method is more stable and efficient than combining runes with various functions into a single spell. It also conserves energy, with very little magic power dissipating. No wonder I couldn't detect any magic fluctuations. The system recycles the magic power itself. It seems the value of this magic book lies not just in the spells it contains, but in its very structure, Anduin concluded after a thorough examination. He noticed that the magic lines were densely packed, with many rune nodes not directly connected, yet coexisting harmoniously. He identified this as the key to the multi-layered rune system. There were two critical points to address. First, determining how many layers of runes the magic book contained, and second, identifying the true connection nodes between the runes of each layer. Without this knowledge, completing the engraving would be impossible. With a clear plan in mind, Anduin delved into his research, meticulously studying the book and jotting down notes on parchment. End of this chapter. Chapter 191, The Alchemical Challenge. In order to speed up his progress, and took another sip of the Felicity elixir. Time was limited, and he needed to crack the magic book as quickly as possible. Yulia, watching from the side, looked at Anduin with disdain. She had immense confidence in her family's treasure, and believed Anduin was merely wasting his time. Seeing him struggle, she even felt a tinge of satisfaction. As the minutes and hours ticked by, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. 10 hours later, Yulia could barely keep her eyes open, her eyelids heavy with fatigue. Meanwhile, Anduin finally raised his head, his eyes red from the strain. Phew! Anduin exhaled deeply, quickly glancing at his pocket watch. Confirming the time, he felt a wave of relief. Fortunately, the Felicity elixir helped. Otherwise, I wouldn't have managed this in such a short time. He had spent 10 hours and half a bottle of the elixir to decipher the spell structure of the magic book. There are 7 layers of runes responsible for protection, recording, excitation, concealment, energy storage, blood, and coordination. The coordination rune is the center of the entire magic circle. I used the exhaustive method to find the communication node, but luckily, I found it in time. Now, he needed to replicate the book. The first and most crucial step was selecting the right materials. To preserve the runes in the magic circle, the materials had to have excellent magic conductivity and sufficient strength. High-level spells, like the ancient lightning rune, required robust materials. But I don't know what the magic book itself is made of. It feels like leather, soft yet strong. What is it made of? Anduin pondered, rubbing the book in his hands but finding no clues. It doesn't matter. If it needs high strength and magic conductivity, I'll just make a new book. I have the materials, he decided. He began sorting through his supplies and soon chose the necessary materials. Since he couldn't replicate the leather book, he would make an iron one. For strong magic, I'll use mithril. To supplement the strength, I'll use ulam steel and agrippa alloy. Ulam steel mixed with mithril will form the cover and book spine, where the coordination runes will be engraved. This area, being the magic intersection of multi-layered runes, requires the greatest strength. The pages will be made of agrippa alloy and mithril. 2 layers of agrippa alloy will sandwich a layer of mithril, providing both strength and magical properties. But this will make the book quite thick. The leather magic book had 150 pages, with only 67 pages storing spells. The rest were blank, yet it was thicker than a typical 100-page book. I'll make 70 pages first, copy the spells, and then find ways to improve it later. With a plan in mind, Anduin began working non-stop. He took out a 3/4-pound mithril candlestick, a 2-ounce ulam steel bracelet, and a pound of agrippa alloy from his interspatial bag. He controlled them to float in the air and used a flame spell to start smelting. During this process, he drank 2 bottles of tonic to replenish his physical strength and magic power. Yulia, who was on the verge of falling asleep, was suddenly awakened by Anduin's actions. She watched in stunned silence as he performed an alchemical feat. Anduin was highly skilled in handling metal materials, a necessity given that most of his alchemical equipment was metal. With the help of spells, his movements were fluid and precise. Anduin's work was as precise and methodical as an industrial machine. He began by smelting the metal into a liquid using a blazing flame, then mixed in a portion of mithril and ulam steel for later use. Using transfiguration, he shaped the remaining mithril and agrippa alloys into 8-carat metal pages. He then combined 3 metal pages in a 1:2 ratio. The residual heat from the pages caused them to fuse together, and Anduin used magic to guide the process, ultimately forming a metal plate with a thickness of 1 millimeter. Next, C. Aim the assembly line operation. After 70 consecutive operations, all the pages were completed. The mixed metal of mithril and ulam steel on the side had also finished its texture fusion. Anduin then used transfiguration to shape it into a cover. The inner spine section featured a row of half-ring buckles. This design was necessary because the metal pages couldn't be turned like regular paper. To solve this, he drilled holes in the metal pages so they could be placed on the rings of the spine. This allowed for easy addition of more pages if needed. The primary function of the spine was to coordinate the runes on each layer. It was essential to leave a magic channel at the junction of the pages and the spine. Compared to the original magic book, the magic power fluctuation would be larger due to the unstable joints, which could cause magic overflow. However, it was functional for now, and further improvements could be made later. This entire process took nearly an hour, and maintaining high-intensity magic control made Anduin's scalp tingle. But the work was far from over. The next step was to inscribe the runes. To ensure he had enough concentration, Anduin drank another bottle of energy potion. The rune inscription was a meticulous task. Fortunately, Anduin was now quite proficient in enchanting. The challenge was the sheer quantity of runes, which required a significant amount of time. After another 3 hours, Anduin finally completed the inscription of the magic coordinating runes on the spine, the bloodline, concealment, and protection spells on the upper and lower covers, and the recording, activation, and energy storage runes on the 70 metal pages. The time spent on this magic book alone was twice as long as the time he spent selecting books. He had been in the library for nearly 20 hours. Stretching his hand, which was stiff from the rune inscription, Anduin finally smiled, despite his pale face. Yulia, who had been with Anduin for almost a day, was in awe. She watched the replica magic book that Anduin had created from scratch, her eyes wide with amazement. The finished product looked like a piece of A4 paper, 10 centimeters thick, and resembled a large brick with a silver metallic luster. It was hard to believe it was a book. If used to hit someone, it could easily cause serious injury. End of this chapter. Camber, Chapter 192, The Metal Magic Book. The surface of the completed metal magic book exuded a more dazzling magical aura than the original, continuously emitting waves of magic power outward. This was inevitable, as it was a replica version. Anduin prioritized practicality in his craftsmanship, so it couldn't be as natural as the original. The magic power leakage was unavoidable, but as long as it was replenished regularly, its effect would be almost the same as the original. After finishing the magic book, there was still one last step left. Anduin took out the injuryless hammer, switched to the strengthened hammer surface, and struck the metal brick hard. The aura on the magic book became much more subdued after the strike. This was because the rune magic array on it had formed a preliminary fusion with the materials, tightening the magic power channels between different spells and reducing the leakage. Then, Anduin carefully transferred all the spells and records from the original magic book to his metal magic book. Seeing this, Yulia became anxious. It was one thing for him to forge the spells again, but now he was trying to steal the usage records, which contained many family secrets. She hurried forward to stop him. "Wait, it's fine if you re-engrave the spells, but you can't take these records away. These are the research results of our family for many years. How dare you?" "Shut up!" Anduin glanced at Yulia coldly. He had already been annoyed by her constant sarcasm since he entered the library, and now she wanted to interfere. Who did she think she was? A lofty, noble lady? "Stop talking nonsense. Our agreement states that all the knowledge of your family, as long as I like it, is mine. You have no right to resist. To me, your Travers family is no different from a cockroach at my feet. What you should do now is pray hard and hope that I don't step on it when I'm in a good mood." Anduin sneered and continued his copying work. Yulia was taken aback by Anduin's threatening words. Coupled with long-term fatigue and mental tension, she collapsed, sitting on the spot and crying loudly, which was extremely miserable. Looking at Yulia crying, Anduin felt no pity for her at all. He only thought she deserved it and found her noise irritating. He cast a sonic expulsion spell on her position and continued copying the spells from the magic book. All kinds of spells, poisonous spells, and curses in the magic book were easily copied to the metal magic book. The only troublesome thing was the ancient lightning rune. The original rune contained a lot of energy and couldn't be directly composed of magic power without analysis. Since there was no spell, the unanalyzed original rune was almost unique. This was why Lucius had asked Yulia to temporarily save it in the magic book. Given the circumstances, it was better to take away the whole rune. Anduin didn't have time to analyze the rune clearly before copying it, so he transferred the rune directly. The metal spellbook, cast with a lot of precious materials, lived up to expectations and easily carried the rune. The place for the Thunderbolt rune on the original spellbook was now empty. After dealing with the magic books, Anduin didn't stop. He began copying the precious books he had screened out. Endless Darkness itself was a magic book that contained magic power, and ordinary parchment couldn't fully bear the runes in it. So, Anduin copied it into the metal magic book, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Another 2 hours passed. Including Slytherin's manuscripts, Anduin finally copied 300 books and materials, all of which were carefully selected by him. The outside world. At this time, Anduin relaxed and stretched his back. The trip had taken 22 hours, leaving him utterly exhausted. Without sparing a glance at the despondent Yulia beside him, he walked out of Traverse Manor. After returning to the Longbottom residence, Anduin took a well-deserved rest for 2 days. He then spent a few days playing with Augusta and Neville. This allowed him to unwind and all, so gave him time to organize the materials he had gathered during his recent endeavors. Today marked the day of the celebration banquet hosted by the Ministry of Magic. Dressed in a brand-new dark suit, Anduin entered the Longbottom living room, feeling refreshed and energetic. Augusta, also dressed formally, had been waiting for him. "Aren't you going to ask Algie to take care of Neville today?" Anduin asked Augusta, puzzled. "No, it's not good to keep Neville cooped up at home. This is a great opportunity to take him out for some fun. Look, I even made a little suit for him," Augusta replied, pulling Neville out from behind her. Anduin noticed that little Neville was impeccably dressed, with his hair neatly combed by Augusta. Anduin smiled and hugged Neville. Then, as if remembering something, he turned to Augusta and asked, "How are we getting there with Neville? He's too young for apparition, and children can't handle that sensation. Plus, you have to call out the place names yourself through the Flu network, and I've never heard of it being used to transport people." "Don't worry about that. We're taking Muggle transportation, which is why I asked you to get ready early," Augusta explained with a smile. Anduin nodded in understanding. He then left the house with Neville and Augusta. Near noon, they finally arrived at the Ministry of Magic. The main hall was teeming with people, and many reporters blocked the entrance. As soon as Anduin and Augusta appeared, they were immediately recognized by the crowd. "Look, it's the underage wizard, the battle hero Anduin," someone shouted. Instantly, all eyes turned towards them, and camera flashes went off wildly. The sudden attention startled Neville, who began to cry loudly in Anduin's arms. Anduin was also taken aback by the overwhelming reception. Before they could react, Vanessa emerged from the crowd and quickly pulled Anduin and Augusta into the elevator. "Merlin's beard, why are there so many people here today?" Augusta asked Vanessa, still dazed by the flashing lights. "It's all thanks to Anduin," Vanessa replied, rolling her eyes at him. "Me?" Anduin asked, bewildered. End of this chapter. Chapter 193. Gossip. "That's right, you don't know how much trouble you've stirred up. This is the first time 5 Death Eaters have been arrested at once since the fall of the Dark Lord, and it was done by an underage wizard. The Daily Prophet and Wizarding Radio have been all over it," Vanessa said, her tone a mix of admiration and exasperation. "Minister Barnold has been pushing the Public Information Department to promote it vigorously, as if he wants to praise you to the skies. The award ceremony was announced a long time ago, and the reporters were invited by the minister to attend the banquet. We can't go in until the time is up, but they arrived early in the morning and blocked the door. We've been bored to death. Vanessa's complaint made Anduin finally understand what Minister Barnold meant when he said there had been no good news from the Ministry of Magic for a long time. The British magical world was indeed small, and such an event could cause a huge uproar. So, the captain told us to stand guard at the door and bring you in as soon as we saw you, to avoid harassment from those people, Vanessa continued. Thank you for your hard work. By the way, what about the friends I invited? They might arrive later, Anduin asked, concerned that his friends might also face harassment. Don't worry, our colleagues are maintaining order, Vanessa reassured him. I haven't told you about the meeting process yet. There will be a commendation banquet later, followed by a trial meeting in the afternoon for those Death Eaters. You have to attend as an involved party. I don't know what the minister is thinking, but he arranged for a trial immediately after the banquet. Oh? Did Minister Barnold want to make a quick decision, putting pressure on those families and forcing them to change their positions? This vigorous style fit Anduin's impression of the minister. Soon, under Vanessa's guidance, they entered the banquet hall. The venue was already bustling with people. The Ministry of Magic had prepared tea breaks and buffet meals, and people were gathered in small groups, chatting. Anduin, you're here! Vivian, dressed in a long gown, greeted Anduin with surprise. Long time no see, Anduin replied with a smile. In reality, it hadn't been that long. It was less than a month before the start of summer vacation. Vivian's voice, however, drew everyone's attention to Anduin. The people in the room turned to look at him, their gazes ranging from curiosity to appreciation, and some even sizing him up. He also noticed a few malicious glances, likely from those troubled by his actions. Most people watched from a distance, maintaining a certain reserve without hastily striking up a conversation. Several acquaintances who had arrived early, including Charles, Velen, and Ibrahimovic, gathered around Anduin. They had arrived via the Flu network. Oh my God, Anduin, you've really made a splash this time, Vivian said with an exaggerated expression. Do you know that the newspapers have been full of news about you? The Ministry of Magic's press release and the interview written by Rita Skeeter. It's rare for her not to talk nonsense. She's practically singing your praises. Is it that exaggerated? Anduin couldn't help but curl his lips. Those interview scripts were actually written by himself. Vivian's words made him feel a bit narcissistic. Yes, we were all taken aback when we heard about it. 5 Death Eaters. I knew Yaxley wouldn't just give up, but I didn't expect him to do something like this, Velen said, shaking his head in disbelief. Terrified, especially after learning that this matter was related to Yaxley, he immediately imagined being sanctioned instead of seeking revenge. Charles, however, was completely different from the other two who were excited. When he approached Anduin, he looked at him with a sincere expression. Anduin, thank you for getting justice for my aunt's family. The McKinnon family will always be your loyal friend, Charles said earnestly. Don't mention it. I was just protecting myself. Anduin replied with a smile. As I said earlier, those guys would pay the price sooner or later. It's just a pity you didn't get to exact revenge with your own hands. I didn't expect you to remember what I said, but seeing that bastard from the Travers family arrested is a relief. It's ironic that the poor guy died by his own hand, Charles sighed, a look of relief washing over his face. It seemed that these families were aware of what had happened and had their own judgments about Torquil's death. While Anduin was pondering this, Charles suddenly pulled him aside. I heard that some people are very dissatisfied with the great award you've received from the Ministry of Magic, especially the title of Battle Hero. If this is implemented, Minister Budnor's prestige will be elevated, and those pure-blood families will be suppressed during her reign. Charles pointed out, You mean they want to oppose this? News has spread throughout the wizarding world. Can they still make the Ministry of Magic retract its order? Anduin narrowed his eyes and smiled. It's hard to say. Recently, some gossip has been circulating among the wizarding families. I'm just a little worried, but our McKinnon family will definitely support you with all our strength. You deserve it, Charles said firmly. What gossip? Anduin raised his eyebrows. Some people say that you are just a pawn pushed out by the Ministry of Magic for show, and even. Charles hesitated. Some people even claim that you didn't defeat those Death Eaters yourself. Since no one else was there at the time, they suggest the confessions of those Death Eaters might have been tampered with. They dare not openly question Minister Budnor, but they might point the finger at you. Heh, clowns. Let them try. Have these people forgotten that in the wizarding world, strength speaks? The mysterious man has disappeared not long ago, Anduin scoffed. Anyway, you'd better be careful. Maybe Minister Budnor's recent methods were too tough, which has caused some pure-blood families to backlash, Charles said with some concern. He didn't fully understand the situation, but his parents were both Aurors, and he occasionally heard some inside information. End of this chapter. Chapter 194. Rebound? If you dare to rebound, push him back. Anduin sneered. He had originally thought that he was here today just to eat, drink, and take pictures, but he didn't expect that there might be a good show to watch. Anyway, just be careful. With Headmaster Dumbledore here, he will back you up, and these are all just rumors, so you don't have to be too nervous, Charles said, trying to comfort him. He suddenly thought of the headmaster and realized he might be worrying too much. My backing has always been myself, Anduin shook his head. Charles, you have to remember one thing. Relying on others will always make you look weak. People must rely on themselves. Seeing Anduin's firmness and thinking of his true strength, Charles nodded in approval. Anduin, what are you two doing in the corner? Come here quickly. Vivienne's voice interrupted their conversation. What's wrong? Charles asked. The banquet is about to start. Didn't you see that the reporters were all let in? Vivienne pouted towards the door, and sure enough, many reporters were entering the hall one after another. Let's go, Anduin. Take pictures with us. When it's published in the newspaper, we'll be seen as the companions of the hero. How impressive is that? Vivienne looked at the two with bright eyes, while Charles rolled his eyes in exasperation. Anduin, glancing at the door, noticed another familiar face entering. It was the Weasleys. However, only Arthur, Bill, Charlie, and Percy were present. Molly, the twins, Ron and Ginny had not come. Except for Bill, Anduin hadn't seen the Weasleys for 2 years, so he happily went up to catch up with them. Anduin! Other Anduin! Brother Anduin! It's 3. Arthur, Bill, Charlie, Percy, long time no see. Anduin laughed. Brother Anduin, is it true that you defeated 5 Death Eaters by yourself? Charlie asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Of course. I know the strength of Big Brother Anduin. 5 Death Eaters are no match for him. Even 5 more wouldn't be enough, Bill boasted, having spent a year with Anduin and understanding his capabilities well. Brother Anduin, I heard that you are now a war hero of the Ministry of Magic. How impressive, Percy said, clearly more interested in Anduin's honor. Anduin, surrounded by the kids, found himself at a loss for words and could only laugh. Okay, this is a public place. Don't make a scene. Arthur tilted his head and told the kids, then looked back at Anduin. It's been a long time. I didn't expect that in just 2 years you would be so different, taller and more handsome. You're too kind. Why didn't Molly and the other children come over? Anduin asked. Those children are still young and mischievous. If they got into trouble, it would be difficult to manage them. Molly has to watch them at home. I happened to be outside when you came to the Ministry of Magic that day, so I couldn't meet you. By the way, I haven't thanked you for inviting us yet, Arthur explained. You're too polite. It's only natural. I haven't seen you all for so long, and I still miss you. I wanted to visit you when I arrived at Longbottom's house, but since there was a banquet at the Ministry of Magic, I thought I'd invite you over to catch up, Anduin said, feeling a lot of affection for the Weasleys, having even witnessed the birth of their youngest daughter. It doesn't matter. You can come to the burrow to visit whenever you are free. We will always welcome you, and Molly always thinks of you. When she saw the news that you were attacked, she was almost terrified, Arthur said, with an exaggerated expression. But when she heard that Brother Anduin was fine and had easily defeated 5 Death Eaters, she laughed again, Charlie said, licking a lollipop he had pulled from nowhere. Easy? That's ridiculous. Only you Weasleys would believe that kind of nonsense. A burst of ridicule suddenly interrupted their happy conversation. Arthur and Anduin frowned slightly at the interruption and turned their heads toward the voice. Avery, what do you mean by that? Arthur asked, Ed clearly dissatisfied. He then leaned into Anduin's ear and whispered, This is Avery. He defended himself with the Imperious Curse and escaped from prison. He and Torquil were good friends. Anduin nodded, recalling what Charles had mentioned earlier, and suddenly understood the situation. So, you want to cause trouble? Well, you're on the list, so don't blame me for being harsh. Avery, who had made the sarcastic remark, sneered. Oh, I know how those people were arrested, but no one would believe the nonsense that an underage wizard defeated 5 Death Eaters. Avery, if you want to watch the show, just watch it quietly. Why do you have to expose it? You'll offend people this way, another voice chimed in, scolding Avery in a mocking tone. However, every word was aimed at Anduin. Lucius, the last thing I want to see is someone using such a pompous performance to deceive people. Why can't I speak my mind? Avery retorted, smiling at Lucius Malfoy, who stood beside him with his long golden hair. Watching the two men exchange exaggerated remarks, Arthur's face flushed with anger. The reporters who had already entered the venue noticed the commotion and quickly surrounded them, cameras aimed and quills poised, eager to capture the unfolding drama. Anduin is a battle hero recognized by the Ministry of Magic, and his actions have been acknowledged by Minister Budnor. What, are you going to deny the Ministry of Magic and Minister Budnor's judgment? Arthur stepped forward, defending Anduin. Hey, I wouldn't dare question the Ministry of Magic, let alone disrespect the minister. But facts are facts. I just feel sorry for the ministry and Minister Budnor. They were deceived by a young wizard without knowing it. How could the minister be kept in the dark by a few words? Avery sighed, feigning sadness. Hearing Avery's words, the surrounding reporters gasped. Could there be a hidden truth behind the attack a week ago? Lucius, standing nearby, added, I see. Do you suspect that Anduin shamelessly deceived the Ministry of Magic and Minister Budnor? End of this chapter. Chapter 195. I Want to Fight. Seeking monthly ticket and recommendation ticket. Do you still need to doubt this? A young wizard defeating 5 vicious adult Death Eaters? If such a thing spreads, it will only make people laugh. Only the kind-hearted Minister Budnor would believe such a statement. Avery sighed again. There is some truth in what you said, but how do you explain the fact that 5 Death Eaters were arrested? Lucius asked rhetorically. Who knows, maybe someone else actually took action. Perhaps the little wizard was just in the right place at the right time, or maybe those wizards were secretly stunned with a potion and left there. Whether they are Death Eaters or not is still uncertain, Avery replied, almost as if reciting lines from a script. Lucius immediately followed up. As they spoke, the wizards watching, representatives of various wizarding families, and a group of reporters couldn't help but become suspicious. That's right, Anduin is just a young wizard who just graduated from the 3rd grade. How could he defeat 5 adult wizards? And what role does Minister Budnor play in all this? Are those wizards really Death Eaters? The wizarding world has ways to modify memory, after all. Maybe the memory of a wizard has been tampered with. Since the details of this raid were strictly kept secret by the Auror Command, the cause of the incident has not been disclosed, so it is no wonder that it aroused their suspicion. Seeing the journalists and wizards talking amongst themselves, Avery and Lucius smiled at each other, knowing they had achieved their desired effect. They couldn't prevent Minister Budnor from awarding the honor, but they could discredit Anduin, attack Minister Budnor's prestige, and diminish the significance of this case. On the other hand, Anduin watched the two perform with relish. He felt that if the two formed a comedy duo, they would be very popular. Their expressions, demeanor, and tone were all lifelike. At the same time, he looked at Lucius in surprise. Isn't this idiot Julia's brother? Doesn't that woman know to remind her brother not to mess with me? And even if he didn't receive the reminder, didn't he notice that no one from the Travers family dared to appear today? Interesting. It was so interesting that Anduin even grinned happily. Arthur, standing beside him, was furious. These two guys were like cannonballs, and he couldn't even find a chance to intervene. He could only watch from the side. In fact, Arthur once doubted the fact that Anduin defeated the 5 Death Eaters, but he trusted Anduin and believed in Minister Budnor. Now that the dispute had been provoked by the two, he had no choice but to stand up. You. Just as Arthur was about to refute the two, Anduin stopped him. Arthur, they are here for me, so they must have been well prepared. To deal with these guys, you can't just talk about it, Anduin said, tugging on Arthur's shoulder with a smile. But Arthur was sweating anxiously and was about to say something when he saw Anduin shaking his head at him. Then Anduin walked up to Arthur and looked at the two men with mocking faces. To put it bluntly, don't you just doubt my strength? Then let me show you, Anduin laughed. Oh, are you going to challenge me? Avery raised his eyebrows and looked at Anduin maliciously, but Anduin shook his head wordlessly. Heh, I thought you were going to have a brave duel with me. You are a coward. Isn't this more proof that you are a liar? Please take a look. The so-called defeating 5 Death Eaters was just a lie Anduin Wilson used to deceive Minister Budnor. Avery spread his hands to show everyone. The surrounding discussions became more and more heated, and the flashing lights kept going off. The war hero of the Ministry of Magic is a liar. There was no more eye-catching headline. Arthur, Vivienne, and the others were anxious, but they could do nothing under the watchful eyes of everyone. Meanwhile, Anduin turned his head and spoke again. Tokil is a piece of trash. What did you say? Avery squinted his eyes at Anduin, not understanding the sudden mention of Tokil. I mean... Anduin paused deliberately. Tokil is worthless, but you are even worse. How can you prove my strength by challenging someone who is less than worthless? I killed 5 Death Eaters. Assuming they are all judged by Tokil's level, it would be like converting them into trash like you. I want to fight 10 of you. This statement immediately caused a commotion among the onlookers. The reporters were taken aback by this unexpected twist. The surroundings, once filled with whispers, now buzzed with the noise of a bustling market. Are you serious? Avery was furious at Anduin's insult and glared at him. If you're afraid, I allow you to kneel and kowtow to apologize to me, Anduin mocked. If you accept the challenge, count yourself and Lucius and pick 8 more like you. Let's go together. I'm in a hurry. All right, you said it. We accept your challenge. Don't blame us for being ruthless. Avery and Lucius couldn't hold back any longer. After being insulted like this, they were determined to teach Anduin a lesson. They immediately started looking for helpers. However, the pureblood families were reluctant to assist Avery and Lucius. They thought, if you need 8 more people to fight one little wizard, what does that make us? Even if we win, it would be embarrassing. Many pureblood nobles, who prided themselves on their status, refused to help. They were not aligned with Avery in the first place, and despite being related through generations of pureblood lineage, they had no intention of bullying a young wizard. After much searching, Avery and Lucius finally found 8 others who had a good relationship with them or had previously followed the Dark Lord. As the group surrounded Anduin, several of his friends, including the Weasley family and the Aurors, stood by his side. End of this chapter. Chapter 196, Snape's Bet. The Aurors, including Vanessa, were utterly confused. Moments ago, it was just a heated argument, and now it seemed like a full-blown duel was about to erupt. Anduin, why are you so impulsive? They provoked you to challenge you to a duel. Why did you fall for it? And now you have to fight 10 more, Arthur said anxiously beside him. That's right, Anduin. You're too impulsive. It's my fault. I should have stepped in to stop you when the clash started, Vanessa said, looking a bit depressed. Let's call the Minister and Dumbledore. I don't understand why they haven't shown up yet, an Auror suggested. Thank you for your concern, but this is a challenge I initiated. I don't want to let these guys off so easily, Anduin replied calmly, shaking his head. Vanessa, please help maintain order. Although this banquet hall is spacious, some spells might accidentally hurt others. Not only did Anduin ignore everyone's suggestions, but he also started giving commands. Are you serious? Do you really want to fight them here? Vanessa looked at Anduin in surprise. That's right. Didn't Minister Budnow want to put pressure on them? I'll give them a little push, Anduin sneered. Anduin, I can't tell if you're so arrogant that you don't know the danger you're in, or if you're so confident that you're looking down on everyone. A gloomy yet familiar voice suddenly spoke beside him. Professor Snape, I didn't expect you to be here. Anduin said softly without turning his head. I'm not arrogant or overly confident. I just have a bit of a clean freak in me. I can't stand seeing dirty things and not trying to clean them up. Professor Snape, you're here too? Vivian, standing next to Anduin, was startled by Snape's voice. She wondered why this professor always liked to sneak up on people. I've been watching the show for quite a while, and the plot is absolutely lame, Snape said disdainfully, curling his lips. Then you should blame those two on the opposite side. It's not my fault the actors are ugly, Anduin laughed. Seeing Anduin and Snape still in the mood to chat, Arthur was beside himself with anxiety. Anduin, I think you'd better not participate in this duel. With so many reporters watching, if you lose, you'll become the laughing stock of the entire wizarding world. Anduin shook his head with a smile and said with determination, Don't worry, I won't fight a battle I'm not sure of winning. Yeah, you didn't seem worried when you made your move. Arthur should be more concerned about the people on the opposite side, Snape chimed in. Anduin noticed the underlying meaning in Snape's words and smiled without replying. This? Arthur was at a loss for words after being told off by the two of them and could only sigh helplessly. Are you really that confident? Snape glanced at Anduin and then at the people opposite him. Yaxley's gang can't compare with this lot. Master Dean, it's rare to see you talk so much, Anduin laughed. Snape snorted coldly at his words. Well, Professor Snape, how about we make a bet? Anduin suggested. How do we bet, and what are we betting on? Snape asked in a low voice. Let's bet on whether I can beat them. If I win, you have to tell me a secret, Anduin proposed with a sly smile. What secret? Snape asked, suddenly feeling wary. A very simple one. For example, how about the countercurse for Sectum Sempra? Anduin suggested, squinting his eyes. Oh, Snape raised his eyebrows in surprise. He didn't expect Anduin to know about that spell. After thinking for a moment, he nodded. All right, if I win, you have to promise me one thing or do something for me. Okay, no problem, Anduin replied with a grin. In that case, I bet you can win, and it will be a complete victory. Snape's voice grew deeper and more serious with each word. Anduin was taken aback for a moment, then smiled wryly. Expecting to be slapped by Snape, Anduin was taken aback. Did the dean really have that much confidence in him? Now the embarrassment was all his. Avery is best at repelling spells and petrification spells. Lucius is just an idiot, so you don't need to worry about him. The strength of the other guys is comparable to Yaxley. With your abilities, handling them shouldn't be difficult, Snape whispered softly into Anduin's ear. Hearing Snape's advice, Anduin could only shake his head helplessly. Thank you, Professor Snape, for your concern. It seems that gambling is truly an abyss of disasters. I was reckless. Snape couldn't help but chuckle at Anduin's words, but he maintained his composure and walked away leisurely. Vanessa and the other Aurors, seeing that Anduin was determined to go his own way despite their warnings, dispersed to maintain order. Avery and Lucius were ready. They had gathered 8 companions, standing in 2 rows, facing Anduin coldly. Anduin, in turn, dispersed the crowd around him and calmly observed his opponents. Anduin, don't blame us if you get hurt. If you want to admit your mistake now, it's still not too late. Just confess that you deceived the Ministry of Magic and Minister Barnold out of vanity, and we can let you go, Lucius said condescendingly, raising his chin high. Don't play the good guy, Lucius. Our fighting hero would never admit defeat. Instead, think about what to do if Minister Barnold blames us for hurting her little hero, Avery sneered. In this duel, we fight until one side loses the ability to resist or surrenders. All the wizards around, please be witnesses, Anduin declared, ignoring the taunts and speaking to the crowd. Avery and Lucius, angered by Anduin's defiance, responded in unison. Okay. Anduin nodded and performed a graceful dueling ceremony. Then, he turned his head and glanced at his friends on the side. Velen, Charles, Vivian, Ibrahimovic, Bill, watch closely. This is how you handle a one-to-many wizard battle. I will only demonstrate this once, he shouted to them. Ah? Oh! Charles and the others were momentarily stunned. They hadn't expected Anduin to be in the mood to give tactical guidance at such a time, but they quickly responded. End of this chapter. Chapter 197, The Duel Begins. As soon as the words fell, Anduin's eyes sharpened. He quickly analyzed the battlefield situation, his mind racing with strategic thoughts. 10 people, standing in 2 rows of 5. I noticed a few were dragged here by Avery. Their will to fight must be uneven. To win quickly, we can't give them time to react. Their formation isn't fully deployed yet, so we need to strike first. Having made his decision, Anduin's magical power surged. Dozens of ravens emerged from beneath his long gown, swirling around him at high speed. It was his improved flock of birds spell, now manifesting as a swarm of crows. The ravens surrounded Anduin, obscuring him from view and leaving the others guessing at his next move. Seeing this, Avery sneered. "Do you think you can win with such a simple spell? It's laughable." "Come on, Avery. Let's finish this quickly. Bullying a child is shameful enough. I'm here to back you up." "Let's get this over with," urged a wizard from the back row. "Exactly. I don't want to be part of a group ganging up on an underage wizard," another wizard responded. Among the wizards who had joined Avery, 3 or 4 were merely there to make up the numbers. They never expected to lose. They were just there out of loyalty to their friend. Now they reluctantly drew their wands, preparing for the fight. Avery realized he couldn't rely on them, but he wasn't worried. A few spells from the front row would be enough to handle this brat. All petrified, drowsy, disarm, quickly imprison, fragmented. The front row didn't waste any time, launching their spells rapidly. They didn't hold back, each spell fast and urgent, with no concern for seriously injuring Anduin. But as soon as the spells appeared, the ravens surrounding Anduin reacted. 2 or 3 crows intercepted each spell, sacrificing themselves to neutralize the attacks. Anduin's spell was ready. Clear water like a spring. A huge jet of water gushed from Anduin's position, surging towards the group. Avery and the others, seeing their spells fail, prepared to attack again but were met with the torrent. "Water and fire, iron armor curse and obstacle curse," Avery responded quickly. He had been in contact with Yaxley before and knew about Anduin's combined Clear Spring Curse and Freezing Curse. Despite his mocking, he was prepared. Whether Anduin used Misty Clouds, the Misguided Body Curse, or Sonic Alchemy props, Avery had a strategy. Avery decisively cast Water and Fire on everyone. Lucius stepped forward, casting the Iron Armor Curse, while the others used obstacles to block the water. "Well prepared. Have you analyzed my previous battles? Unfortunately, you're going to miscalculate. I don't plan to use my old tactics or alchemy props this time. Today, I'll defeat you in front of everyone." Anduin declared confidently, moving his wand swiftly. The water, hitting the barrier formed by the obstacle curse, surged like a wave against an embankment. Instead of flowing back, it defied physics under Anduin's control. The water climbed the barrier, crossed it, and bypassed the sides, continuing towards the group. Several people were swept away by the rushing water. Although protected by the water and fire spell, their bodies were still overwhelmed by the force. The fire inviolability curse was supposed to protect them, but the water streams seemed to have transformed, climbing onto them like tentacles and sticking tightly. "Scatter!" Avery shouted. He didn't understand the purpose of these non-aggressive currents, but he knew they couldn't let the opponent's plan succeed. Quickly, Avery cast a human-shaped iron armor curse on himself, wrapping his entire body to prevent the strange water from spreading to him. By this time, the water had already ensnared the people in the front row. Those in the rear, heeding Avery's warning, quickly dispersed and retreated to avoid the water. The 4 wizards who were initially further back managed to hide, but one of them still got entangled by the current. Rai then heard a zla sound. The people around him seemed to be convulsing, with electric lights flickering on their bodies. Lucius was the worst off, collapsing straight to the ground. An electric current had traveled through the water, paralyzing them. This was Anduin's doing, using lightning magic. Although he hadn't immediately mastered the ancient lightning runes, he had studied the basic ones thoroughly in preparation. His affinity for the runes was high, and his progress had been swift. Sure enough, the voltage of ordinary lightning runes is still a bit low. It only has a slight paralyzing effect, Anduin muttered, dissatisfied. But he moved quickly. Stupefy. Several spells later, the paralyzed wizards, including the prone Lucius, were knocked out. Seeing Anduin defeat several people almost instantly with just a few spells, the surrounding wizards and reporters gasped in astonishment. "My God, what happened?" Weren't those wizards protected by the fire inviolability curse? How could the water still cling to them? And why did they seem to be immobilized all of a sudden, with almost no resistance before being knocked down? A reporter exclaimed in confusion. The Aguamenti spell was transfigured, allowing it to entangle those protected by the fire inviolability curse. Then, using water's conductive properties, Anduin applied lightning magic to paralyze them. Such ingenuity is truly characteristic of Anduin, a voice explained from the reporter's feet. Looking down, the reporter saw a short figure who didn't resemble a goblin. Upon closer inspection, he recognized him as Professor Flitwick from Hogwarts. Professor Flitwick had just arrived at the scene and was immediately captivated by the duel. His eyes sparkled as he watched the field. At this moment, Avery finally realized what had happened. End of this chapter. Chapter 198, Profound Truth, Jumping Left and Right. Damn! Avery, standing on the side of the venue, watched in shock as Anduin swiftly knocked down 5 of his comrades. He quickly urged the remaining wizards around him. Hurry up and attack together. He just used several area spells simultaneously. He must have expended a lot of magic power. Don't let this slip-up cost us our lives. The 4 wizards in the rear realized the gravity of the situation. The flashing lights of the reporters and the murmurs of the onlookers added to the pressure. They knew they couldn't afford to be complacent any longer. Clean it up. Disarm you. Stupefy. The wizards in the back reacted swiftly, using a cleaning spell to clear the accumulated water on the ground. They no longer underestimated Anduin. They cast spells one after another, not caring whether they were effective, just wanting to overwhelm him with sheer volume. Heh, you finally got serious, but isn't it a little late now? If all 10 of you had started with a saturation attack, it might have posed a threat to me. But now... Anduin smirked before moving quickly. Anduin's body moved with sudden agility, jumping left and right with nimble steps like a responsive hare. He dodged the incoming curses with just his body movements. Spells whizzed past him, some missing by mere centimeters. Anyone else might have been nervous and made a mistake under such pressure, but Anduin remained calm, his expression cold. It was as if he was a bystander manipulating his own body. He turned sideways, tilted his head, or bent over, making almost all the spells miss. The few spells he couldn't avoid were deflected by his wand. The curses that missed him hit the stone wall behind him, creating a series of loud bang-bang sounds, reminding everyone of their power. The wizards and reporters watching were stunned. It was outrageous to see someone avoid most magical attacks using just physical agility. No, his speed is too fast. You can't just aim at his current position. I'll track his movements. You attack his sides with powerful spells. Avery, though surprised by Anduin's agility, quickly formulated a plan and commanded his team. The 4 wizards nodded seriously. The young man before them could no longer be measured by the standards of a normal wizard. They had to go all out. It's too slow to react to their attacks now. Well, the warm-up is over, Anduin thought, slightly exasperated. The 5 wizards, unaware of Anduin's thoughts, acted quickly according to Avery's instructions. Thunderbolt, explosion, thousands of bullets, flame. They cast powerful and wide-range spells. Since Anduin was fast and good at movement, they decided to use area spells to limit his dodging. The crowd gasped in astonishment. It was already considered unfair to use such large-scale spells in a many-to-one duel, but after seeing Anduin's response, their jaws dropped. Anduin leaped forward, continuously stepping on transparent stepping stones formed by an obstacle spell under his feet. Like a character from a martial arts novel, he climbed up and jumped to a height of 5 or 6 meters in an instant. Fortunately, the banquet hall was wide and high enough. Otherwise, he would have hit the ceiling. Merlin's beard. How can he use the impediment spell like that? Can he really cast spells like that? A reporter exclaimed in surprise, watching the scene unfold. Shh, what's the big deal? You haven't seen Anduin drag us through his 3-meter-high obstacle course every day, Vivian boasted proudly. Oh, are you Anduin's companion? What is an obstacle course? Why do you run on it? The reporter asked, intrigued by Vivian's bragging. I'm a classmate of his at the same college. The obstacle course is created by the obstacle curse. Anduin makes us run and train on it daily. If we don't complete a certain number of laps within the specified time, The curse fails, and we fall off. It hurts, Vivian explained, recalling some unpleasant memories. The reporter was secretly amazed by Vivian's words. Young people nowadays are really something. Do they usually train like this? He thought to himself. Returning his attention to the field, the reporter noticed Anduin making a new move. Anduin leaped into the air, landing firmly 6 or 7 meters above the ground. The powerful spells flying towards him missed, resulting in deafening explosions. "You guys are tired. Now it's my turn," Anduin sneered. "Damn it, use the explosive curse to knock him down," Avery shouted, panting heavily. If you use so many powerful spells all at once, we'll all be exhausted," a wizard next to him complained. After a series of high-frequency spellcasting and powerful burst spells, they were all worn out. Some of them began to regret agreeing to Avery's foolish challenge. They had come for a banquet, not a duel. Anduin, hovering in the air, was uninterested in their thoughts. Since they dared to stand against him, they would soon be lying down. In an instant, Anduin launched his attack. His right hand, holding the wand, moved swiftly, creating afterimages. He then cast a series of curses, attacking the group below from his elevated position. The wizards on the ground hurriedly cast the iron armor curse to defend against the incoming spells. However, Anduin's spells were not as simple as they seemed. From the defender's perspective, Anduin had cast only 5 spells, 1 at each of them. But when the spells collided with their iron armor curse, they discovered another layer of complexity. As the spells hit the iron armor curse, there was a dull poof sound. The defenders felt the spell's power and weight. Despite being just stun spells, their strength was ridiculously high. End of this chapter. Chapter 199. It's You. After finally resisting the initial barrage, they discovered it wasn't over yet. There was another stunning spell hidden behind the first one. How did that kid manage to cast 10 spells in just a second or two? One of the wizards was still puzzled, not realizing that his magic power was already depleted from the previous high-intensity attack. The iron armor curse he had cast was now faltering under the impact of the second stunning spell. Unsurprisingly, the wizard was hit solidly by the spell and was sent flying. As for the others, some managed to respond in time, quickly casting the iron armor curse to defend against the attack. Avery, who was quite skilled, barely managed to defend himself. After resisting the 2 spells, he immediately prepared to counterattack. But when he looked up, he found that Anduin was no longer in the air. When he lowered his gaze, he saw that Anduin had returned to the ground and was launching another attack. 4 spells of drowning shot towards them at high speed, almost skimming the ground. Avery, who reacted suddenly, had no time to warn the others. He quickly set up the protective spell again to block this sneak attack. Before he could commend himself for his quick reaction, he heard 2 thuds as his comrades hit the ground. "So that's it. It's really beautiful." Professor Flitwick, who was watching from the side, restrained himself from applauding, but couldn't help but express his admiration. "Professor Flitwick, was there anything special just now? Why do I feel that Anduin easily knocked down 3 of them with just a few stunning spells?" a confused reporter asked. "Heh, those spells were not simple," Professor Flitwick replied, shaking his head lightly. "Anduin actually took advantage of the difference in perspective to defeat them." "The height difference of the viewing angle?" the reporter asked, still puzzled. "That's right. Anduin was standing high in the air and cast the spells from above. Didn't you see that those wizards were all looking up and using the iron armor curse? While they were defending, Anduin quickly descended to the ground," Flitwick explained patiently. Then he used the earth-sticking curse technique and cast a few more spells. Their defensive focus was still on the high altitude, and they didn't have time to pay attention to Anduin's movements. His spells were fast and urgent, making it impossible for normal people to react. Professor Flitwick's explanation made sense to the reporter. And don't be fooled by how effortlessly Anduin seemed to cast those spells. He used the multiple spells technique from Finkeley's spellcasting method. Most people can manage 2 or 3 spells at once, but Anduin cast 10 spells simultaneously. He also used the hidden spell technique and the ground spell in his final sneak attack. In just a few seconds, Anduin employed 3 of Finkeley's spellcasting techniques, and he used them in combination. His speed and accuracy are simply amazing." Flitwick said excitedly. The reporters and wizards watching nodded in agreement, even if they didn't fully understand the technical details. They could tell it was impressive. Meanwhile, Avery and the remaining wizard in the field felt, as if under immense pressure, the wizards fell one by one. Anduin neither hid to attack nor used any peculiar props. He simply stood there, and they collapsed. When they were still in a daze, Anduin acted. He lifted his wand and flicked it back, as if pulling something invisible. Avery didn't notice anything happening, and no spell was cast. However, the wizard next to him was not so lucky. A fainted wizard behind them suddenly flew forward as if yanked by an invisible rope, crashing into the wizard next to Avery. "Ah!" The wizard cried out as he was hit, then was struck by Anduin's Stupefy spell. He only had time to scream before being sent flying, crashing into the crowd of onlookers outside the venue, causing a commotion. Seeing his last companion fall, Avery felt a chill run down his spine. He had intended to defeat Anduin to dampen Millicent Barnold's spirit, but now he was the one humiliated. Anger surged within him, and he glared at Anduin with resentment, as if he wanted to devour him. "Yes, that's the look," Anduin thought, silently encouraging Avery. "You must feel very angry. Don't you want to kill me? Don't hesitate. Use the killing curse. The annoying man in front of you will disappear. Come on, use it." Anduin watched Avery quietly, hoping he would lose control and use the unforgivable curse. But in the end, Avery suppressed his murderous intent and opted for his most proficient spell instead. "All Petrificus Totalis," Avery shouted, casting the full body bind curse. Anduin sighed, curling his lips in disappointment. "How can this guy be so patient?" he thought. "It seems that ordinary pressure and psychological hints are not very effective without more provocation." Facing Avery's spell, Anduin didn't bother with any more words. He strode forward, easily deflecting the petrification spell, and then countered a few more curses that Avery shot in quick succession. Avery watched in horror as Anduin walked straight up to him. Just as Avery was about to cast another curse at close range, Anduin whipped his leg violently, knocking Avery's wand out of his hand. At that moment, Avery finally remembered. Years ago, a teenager had kicked his wand away just like this. "Oh, it's you!" Avery realized. Anduin was the one who had rescued Sirius. End of this chapter. Chapter 200, Vomit. It was exactly the same as that time. After disarming Avery with a flick of his wand, Anduin delivered a roundhouse kick that left Avery retching. Without missing a beat, Anduin grabbed Avery by the hair and followed up with a swift, hard knee strike. Boom! Avery struck with immense force, collapsed to the ground, his face bloodied. He fell unconscious, his head lolling to the side. In his last moments of consciousness, Avery's mind drifted back to that night. But this time, there was no Snape to come to his rescue. Snape, watching from the sidelines, shook his head helplessly. Avery, once a classmate and colleague, was now on a different path. A collective gasp arose from the crowd of reporters, aurors, and wizards who had gathered to watch. They had witnessed Anduin single-handedly defeat 10 adult wizards without sustaining a single injury. His hair remained perfectly in place, and the spectators were left in awe. Many had come expecting to see Anduin fail, but now they were forced to reconsider. Anduin had proven his strength and capability, demonstrating that he could indeed defeat adult wizards. No one dared to question the Ministry of Magic's decision to award him the title of Battle Hero. "What? You think those adult wizards didn't use their full strength, or went easy on him? Didn't you see how Anduin stood tall while the wall behind him lay in ruins?" Almost immediately after Anduin's victory, reporters surged forward, surrounding him. Even Vivian and the others couldn't get through the throng. Anduin quickly cast a circular shield with the obstacle charm to keep them at bay, then turned to face the reporters with a professional smile. "Mr. Wilson, how do you feel after winning this duel? When you faced Avery's provocation, what were you thinking? Did you ever consider giving up? At your age, how have you achieved such strength? Do you have any comments on the War Hero Medal awarded by the Ministry of Magic? What are your future goals? Do you have a girlfriend? Is it true that you are Muggle-born? Were you nervous during the duel just now?" The reporters bombarded Anduin with questions, but he maintained his smile and gave no response. He had no intention of wasting his breath on them. What happened here? Why is there a wizard lying on the ground? A commanding voice cut through the reporter's questions. Everyone turned to see Minister Barnold arriving, accompanied by Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, Moody, Director Barty Crouch, and a young man whom Anduin recognized as Barty Crouch Jr. Vanessa, who had been tending to the fallen wizards, hurried forward to report to Minister Barnold, summarizing the events in the banquet hall. So, Avery, who is lying on the ground, doubted Anduin's strength, and they started a duel on the spot? What nonsense! Why didn't you stop it? Minister Barnold frowned, directing her question at Vanessa. This is all my fault, Anduin interjected, squeezing through the crowd of reporters. He looked directly at Minister Barnold. I initiated the challenge. They weren't just questioning my ability. They were mocking you, the Ministry of Magic, and Minister Barnold. I was angry, and in order to defend the ministries and your honor, I recklessly issued the challenge and prevented Vanessa and the others from intervening. If anyone is to blame, it should be me. Oh. Minister Barnold looked at Anduin in surprise, then glanced at Dumbledore beside her. Dumbledore, with his usual calm demeanor, nodded slightly, indicating that she could handle the situation as she saw fit. At this moment, Arthur, who had been observing the battle, stepped forward to confirm Anduin's account. Minister Barnold, it's true. Avery was the one who initiated the provocation. We all heard it. Anduin was challenged to an extremely unfair duel, 1 against 10, and he accepted without hesitation. They clearly targeted Anduin, hoping to embarrass him and discredit the Ministry of Magic. But they miscalculated. Anduin defeated them almost effortlessly, witnessed by all the wizards present. Is that so? Minister Barnold turned to look at the Aurors and the other wizards present. Indeed. A wizard nearby nodded in agreement. Anduin has already proven himself with his strength. Absolutely. The Aurors, already displeased with Avery, had no intention of supporting him now. This duel was truly exciting, added Professor Flitwick, still immersed in the memory of the battle. In that case, do you agree that Anduin's strength is worthy of the title Battle Hero awarded by the Ministry of Magic? Minister Barnold asked with a smile. Mr. Wilson's strength is well-deserved. A member of the Wizengamot nodded. That's right. With the strength Mr. Wilson has shown, he would certainly have no problem dealing with a few Death Eaters, a reporter chimed in. In truth, the duel was not as thrilling as one might have imagined. At least half of the challengers lacked fighting spirit from the start, and no one used the unforgivable curses. However, the sheer spectacle of a 10-on-1 battle was impressive, and Anduin's calm demeanor during the fight convinced everyone of his capabilities. Minister Barnold nodded reassuringly. Very well, if that's the case, I declare this duel to be legal. I will not pursue any action against Anduin for casting spells off campus. Vanessa, please ensure the unconscious participants are taken to the hospital. The banquet shall continue. Minister Barnold had never intended to hold Anduin accountable. After understanding the situation, he quickly realized the beneficial impact this duel could have on the Ministry of Magic. However, he needed to maintain an appearance of impartiality to convince the crowd. Seeing that everyone was satisfied, he felt reassured. She was now curious about the extent of Anduin's abilities. End of this chapter.